What happens when a girl's trip is a map to one address and one man, and the only sound left to trust is a printer spooling in the night? How do you answer a public lie with private records and a calm plan that ends in daylight, witnesses, and a packet with edges that do not bend? Can a husband keep dignity when reels, toasts, and in-laws call him the villain? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Elin Severin, and I believe in rules that hold when people let go. She said she was leaving for a girl's trip, light suitcase, and brighter captions, and told me I should relax. I rinsed 2 mugs and set them on opposite counters, a small border anyone could read. The guest bed showed a shallow ripple that did not smooth. I opened my phone and typed a plain reminder, downtown 4:15 p.m., then locked the screen before the light invited questions. The apartment carried a faint line of printer toner, though no page waited in the tray. On the wall planner, a red circle kept its shape. Under my keyboard, a sticky note read, "Bring forms," in my careful hand. I slid a thin binder labeled Utilities back into the drawer and turned the key until the soft click settled the room. She said I was controlling. Her sister said I should be gracious. I said I would keep my schedule. Numbers accept respect, so I wrote times instead of arguments and saved them where clouds remember better than people. The door closed, the latch spoke once, and my phone lit as private, then went dark. I decided to move only inside the rules. I woke before the alarm because the apartment felt slightly off, like a frame turned 1 degree on a white wall. The suitcase sat open on the bed, not the heavy kind for a week, but a light carry-on with outfits that lined up like declarations. I registered perfume that did not live here, and a travel-size bottle labeled in someone else's handwriting. I did not touch anything. I counted 5 slow breaths and opened the window 2 inches, so the morning could rinse the room without demanding answers. Air moved in a narrow ribbon. I let it pass over the sheets and took 1 step back, then another, until my heel found the hallway rug where the fibers always return to shape. In the kitchen, I rinsed 2 mugs and set them on opposite counters. Borders can be quiet and still be true. The kettle clicked to attention, then settled into a soft hiss. I placed my phone flat on the table, opened the calendar, and typed a small banner. Downtown 4:15 p.m. The text fit on a single line, polite and exact. I locked the screen before it could shine at the wrong time. On the wall planner, I traced the red circle from last night. The ink had dried into certainty. Under my keyboard, the sticky note waited with its 2 quiet words, "Bring forms," written in my careful hand. I slid a thin binder labeled Utilities into the drawer and turned the key until the lock delivered its soft click. Drawers should close when asked. She came into the hall with sunglasses on her head, though the day had not decided on sun. She said it was a girl's trip and that I should try being gracious. I poured coffee, asked if she wanted some, and she said she did not want anything heavy. I said coffee is a weight people choose. She laughed without smiling. I told her I would keep my schedule. She said schedules are cages. I said fences keep gardens from becoming paths. We both stayed quiet long enough to make the refrigerator hum feel like a metronome. Back in the bedroom, the guest bed showed a shallow ripple across the top sheet. Not sleep, more like someone once leaned and practiced leaving. I photographed the corner of her printed itinerary where the date sat clean. I kept the frame clear of names and tucked the image behind a picture of lemons in my gallery. The cloud notice arrived like a clerk. File uploaded successfully. I prefer sentences that do not ask for applause. I opened my laptop to a dull desktop, home, auto, bank, then a spreadsheet that looks like a budget if you do not care. The headers stayed small, date, time, initials, location. I entered last night's minute when the group chat started shaping the trip, and 2 letters that will never form a name. Save. A small icon pulsed and rested. She moved from room to room in a rhythm that wanted to be mistaken for urgency. She said her sister would drive her to the airport and that I should not stew. I said I had dishes, then work. She said I should learn to trust. I said I respect clocks. She rolled the suitcase to the door and tested the handle like she was auditioning exits. I watched the latch return to place after each test, a neat tongue that knows its job. In the dining room, the printer coughed once, then fed a single blank page into the tray as if to check its own breath. I folded the page once along the long edge and filed it into a folder labeled Household. Dull names make good armor. I stepped onto the balcony to see the driveways lined to the street. Mrs. Klein balanced a grocery bag at her hip and looked up the way people do when they register weather and neighbors at the same time. A sedan idled nose out, aligned with the road, not the building. The engine's tone stayed steady. I turned that detail into a short row on the spreadsheet and saved again. In my pocket, a small USB warmed under my thumb. Today's date was written on the side with a fine marker. I taped a twin USB under the back flap of a folder whose tab read taxes. The tape made a dry kiss. The plastic vanished into ordinary. She called from the hallway that she would send the hotel name later. I said I already had a grocery list and would be at the store after work. She said we should post a warm photo tonight to reset the feed. I said warmth requires shelter more than filters. She opened the door wide as a show of ease, then pulled it shut with a single practiced motion. The latch answered in a tone I know better than most people's voices. I stood still and let the apartment settle around the sound. I gathered the mail from the slot and flipped the stack so the newest postmark faced up. An unsealed envelope slid free and showed a corner of a printed screenshot. I did not pull it farther. I placed it under a flyer for vacuum filters and let the paper weight be enough. My phone vibrated once with a call labeled private and went dark. I did not answer. The kettle let out a small breath, as if to remind the room that water keeps every promise it can. At the table, I opened a browser window minimized behind my work life and left yesterday's searches where I parked them. Storage options, delivery tracking, notary near me. I scrolled one line lower to prove to myself I was not stuck, then shrank the window to a ribbon. A recurring banner, meeting, personal, ghosted into the corner and left when I tapped it. I lifted the guest bedsheet and smoothed it fully. When fabric refuses a memory, it is not proof of anything. It is only fabric. I wrote the time I tried smoothing and filed that too. My mother texted one heart and asked if I was eating. I wrote back that mornings were tidy. My brother offered a drive and a talk. I declined and said no scenes. He sent a storm cloud emoji. I let it pass like actual weather. In the hallway, the neighbor's door clicked, then hushed. Somewhere along the siding, a small nail adjusted to temperature and ticked like a watch. I listened long enough to know the pattern and gave the sound its own line in the day's rhythm. Before I left, I set 2 mugs to dry on opposite towels and wiped the counter in one direction only. The phone lit again, not with a call, but with a preview from a contact renamed with a single emoji. The line appeared and then erased itself without a sound, a sentence that decided against existing. I pressed the side button and the glass turned obediently to black. The apartment air carried a faint trace of toner, clean and dry. I locked the drawer and felt the small mechanics agree. I stood at the door with my keys in hand and looked back once at the kitchen, once at the wall planner. The red circle did not waver. I breathed in through my nose for 4 counts, out for 6, because breath is a lever that moves thought. The hallway draft tightened the door against its frame without my touch. I reached the office before most of the row had chosen a mood. The lights hummed with that soft, fluorescent patience that makes every desk look equally possible. I set my bag down, aligned the keyboard with the mat, and opened the dashboard that measures pallets and arrival windows. Numbers greeted me without personality, which is why I trust them. I confirmed 2 shipments, adjusted a variance line, and copied the clean total into the weekly memo draft. My hands kept a steady pace even as my ribs remembered the sound of our door latch. Work is a harness when the street tilts. 2 chairs scraped behind me and produced voices that wanted to be casual but carried last night's captions. One teammate said a girl's trip looks healthier than a couple that suffocates each other. Another said I should let her breathe. I shifted my monitor 5 degrees and opened a second sheet that looks like a budget to anyone passing. Inside, the headers stayed small and calm. Date, time, initials, location. I logged yesterday's airport timestamp, 2 letters that do not build a name, and a short note that only I would understand later. Save. The cloud icon lifted and set down again with its modest line. File uploaded successfully. I allowed 1 full breath to acknowledge the sentence and moved on. At 9:10, a recurring banner drifted into the corner, meeting personal. I dismissed it with a quick tap. A minimized browser window waited where I had parked it. Storage options, delivery tracking, notary near me. I scrolled 1 line lower, took a dated screenshot, and slid the image into my phone gallery behind a photo of lemons. The cloud message rose and fell again. My desk looked boring by design. Boring survives. In the break nook, the air smelled like flavored creamer and the afterthought of toast. 2 coworkers traded a soft debate about control versus freedom. One suggested that jealousy is an illness, the other said boundaries are health. I asked if the floor printer had settled. Someone said it believed in selective service. I sent a test job from the hallway tablet and watched the tray exhale 1 blank page as if the machine were clearing its throat. I folded the sheet once and filed it into a manila folder labeled household that lives in my bag. Dull labels keep attention away from what matters. Gavin, my supervisor, walked past and gave a considerate nod. 10 minutes later, his message appeared on my screen, short and even. Quick word when ready. I replied after I closed a variance ticket with the kind of summary a person can stand on. He sent a thumbs up that means economy of time. Before I stood, a group chat pinged my phone with glitter I do not use. The thumbnail showed a rooftop rail and a glass with a caption about all girls, all glow. I pressed the side button and turned the screen over. The desk absorbed the light. Back at the monitor, I finished the weekly memo draft and ran the spell check I do not actually need. The cloud icon nodded its small approval. File uploaded successfully. On the far end of the floor, a laugh erupted with the shape of a screenshot. My stomach considered the possibility and then returned to inventory because inventory does not profit from worry. Gavin appeared at the edge of my partition and tilted his head toward the corridor. I joined him at a pace that suggested neither urgency nor delay. The HR door sat open like a mouth trying to be kind. He asked, in a voice that respects walls, if I needed time. I said routine helps. He asked if online noise was touching my day here. I said the numbers remained clean. He said the door stays open. I said I appreciated the anchor. We stood by the printer longer than the conversation required and watched it do nothing at all. It felt like a witness that would not gossip. On the way back to my desk, the elevator bell chimed somewhere down the hall. High, bright, and neutral. I sat, placed both hands flat for a second, and let the sound pass through. Then I opened the spreadsheet again and added a new line with the precise minute the rooftop teaser posted. I used initials that do not climb into a person. Save. File. Uploaded successfully. I kept my breathing between those 4 words. An email from HR arrived with a tone I trust. A brief check-in, a link to resources, a line about privacy. I accepted a short meeting for later in the week and returned to pallets, drivers, and windows. In the next pod, someone narrated an airport story where the girls ran into an old friend who just happened to be in the same city. I thought about geography and how coincidence depends on people ignoring maps. I confirmed a doc time with a vendor, wrote 2 normal sentences that will live in a normal inbox, and let the ordinary weight of those sentences tip the scale back towards center. The phone on my desk vibrated once with a tag request for a carousel called Moments That Matter. The first tile showed a beach at sunset. The second tile showed a cafe mug with 2 hands around it, a frame that could be anyone's if anyone did not include me. I let the lock screen keep the request. I do not collect images that do not explain themselves. I pulled open my bottom drawer and checked the location of a small USB with today's date written in fine ink. I do not need it to feel safe. I need it so that later I do not trust only memory. I closed the drawer until the latch met home with a gentle sound. The climate control above my head adjusted its breath. The vents lined up with the rhythm on my screen. Pallet counts continued to arrive like small truths. By mid-morning, the floor had fully woken. A junior analyst asked if I could review a replenishment plan. I did, sent 2 comments, and thanked them for their clean columns. A different colleague swung by to ask if Friday's team lunch would see me. I said I would try. He said the roof view was good. I said, views do not change numbers. He laughed lightly and moved on. At the corner of my vision, another phone lifted and angled toward me as though stoicism were a trick worth filming. I looked at the wall clock instead. The red second hand kept its promise. I took a short walk to the window and watched trucks queue along the service lane, each cab idling with pragmatic patience. The skyline refused to provide narrative. It was only buildings, each holding its own gravity. I returned to the desk, opened my gallery, and confirmed the date-stamped screenshot I had filed behind lemons. The cloud's last notice stayed put. I locked the screen and turned it face down with care that did not call attention to itself. Gavin reappeared and said his quick word could be now or later. I said now was fine. I stood, smoothed my tie with 2 fingers, and felt my jaw change assignments from clench to count. I counted the steps to the corridor. 7 to the corner, 4 to the printer, 5 to HR. The elevator bell chimed again, clear and precise, a sound taller than the car. As I stepped away from the desk, my phone lit on the mat with a fresh photo tag. The small thumbnail framed a rooftop laugh I recognized, and the white caption bar froze my name as the word controlling. The rooftop bar pretended wind could be negotiated. Heat lamps glowed like patient beacons, and glass walls made the skyline look tame. Sarah had tagged the location before her shoes touched the deck, so phones already hovered like small aircraft. I chose the edge where a heater column met the railing. From there, I could watch without filling anyone's frame. The music placed a simple beat beneath 1,000 little performances. I ordered water and set the glass on a coaster, as if posture could be poured into circles. I kept my coat on because boundaries help even when the air is kind. Mira entered in a bright jacket that collected attention without asking. She moved with the confidence of someone who expects applause. Sarah trailed with her camera set to portrait. 2 friends I barely knew spread their arms and declared that freedom looked good on everyone. Caleb arrived 5 minutes later, performing coincidence the way some people breathe. He greeted the others first, then chose a spot that placed him a careful shoulder from Mira. Their geometry was neat and practiced. I noted the angle in my mind and let the heater's hum steady my chest. The server delivered a wave of small plates and encouragement. Sarah said the night needed a story. A friend said the story was about brave choices and new chapters. Someone asked if I felt out of place. I said I was fine and would stay out of lanes. My voice stayed level. A breeze pushed under the glass. Napkins lifted and fell. The city made its ordinary low roar that swallows names and gives back weather. I prefer weather to opinions. Weather tells you what it is, and then does it. I slipped one earbud in and made a short call from the railing. I asked about hours and identification. I asked how confirmations are recorded. I did not use names. The voice on the line replied with policy words that have no attachment to feelings. I thanked the voice and ended the call. In my message thread titled Follow Up, I entered the time, the location, and 2 initials that will never add up to a person. Save. The cloud icon flickered and then calmed. File uploaded successfully. I returned the earbud to my pocket and set the world's volume back to public. Sarah lifted her phone and asked Mira to say the girls' trip line again because the caption needed a match. Mira delivered it with gentle vowels and a tilt that tells a lens where to sit. Caleb smiled into a corner of the frame and pretended it was accidental. 2 friends applauded. One said mistakes are just drafts of better moments. Another said partners who cannot handle drafts should not edit other people's lives. I picked up my glass and placed it back on the same ring of water I had left on the coaster. Repetition can be a roof. A server offered a cocktail on the house and called it a peace offering. I declined and thanked him for the water. He looked relieved because refusing drama is easier to carry than spilling it. Behind him, a group cheered for a birthday and held phones high to prove they had been near joy. Sarah swung the camera toward me and whispered to someone that stoicism is its own performance. I let the lens have posture and nothing else. The heater clicked once, then settled into a steady exhale. I matched it. We drifted 2 blocks to a family restaurant with a long table that wanted to be a bridge. Candles pretended to soften what the phones were sharpening. Ruth managed seating like a stage manager who knows which marks matter. I was placed near the end with a clear line of sight to the head. From there, I could observe how sentences were assigned their jobs. A cousin with a paper sash announced that someone would say a few words. The few words multiplied into a speech with the weight of a sail. The speech praised courage to explore, kindness in the face of limited partners, and joy that does not ask permission. It spoke of girls who heal each other by traveling together. Each sentence floated past the facts like a lantern cut from its tether. Sarah's camera found Mira's profile and placed her against a candle halo. Then the camera tilted slightly to include my face as a soft background problem. I kept my fork aligned with my knife and let my breathing trace the wall clock's second hand. Counting is a bridge I can trust. Caleb hovered near the corridor to the restrooms, visible but deniable. When the room laughed at a gentle jab about stubborn husbands, his smile pointed itself toward the floor, which is the approved direction for humility in public. Ruth leaned forward and suggested that I could support Mira by choosing grace. She spoke to the candles more than to me. Maris lifted her water and took a single measured sip. She met my eyes without adding a speech. Her restraint was a rope I could hold. Under the table, my phone vibrated once, then settled. The lock screen showed a tag request from a carousel called Something to Remember. Tile 1 displayed a beach. Tile 2 displayed a cafe cup in 2 hands. Tile 3 waited behind a swipe I did not grant. I turned the phone face down without disturbing the knife or fork. I checked my inside pocket for the small USB labeled with today's date. Its edge touched my palm like a carpenter's pencil behind an ear. It was a simple tool, not a statement. I excused myself to the corridor with a bulletin board that blooms with flyers no one reads twice. I photographed the bottom corner of a chestnut notice with the date sitting neat and square. I filed the image behind the lemons in my gallery because ordinary cover keeps important seeds safe. The cloud notification appeared and withdrew with its working tone. File uploaded successfully. A server passed with plates and asked if I needed anything. I said I was fine and would respect the flow of the room. He nodded in a way that meant thank you for being easy to place. When I returned, Ruth announced that the evening deserved a toast. Sarah agreed and called for a moment the algorithm would understand. Phones rose, tilting like sunflowers toward predictable light. Mira adjusted her shoulders, a millimeter of practiced grace. Caleb angled into the border where silhouettes pretend not to touch. The candles trembled at a door draft and then steadied. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. The sound drew a clean circle around the table. A cousin started a chant that turned private choices into public choreography. I looked at my water and watched the surface respond to other people's excitement. Tiny waves arrived and then flattened. The napkin under the glass held its damp signature like a firm, small truth. I let my shoulders stay still. A lens loves movement. Stillness confuses it. Across from me a server retreated, sensing that the air had changed and did not need him to teach it manners. Ruth's eyes flicked toward me and waited for a scene that would confirm her script about control. I did not give her one. I gave the table my spine and my breath. Sarah counted down from 3 with her hand open like a conductor. The room inhaled. Mira lifted her chin to the degree that flatters. Caleb leaned an inch into the joint frame. Someone whispered the line about brave girls and kind knights. A friend declared that love expands when rules loosen. The music softened as if it knew the cue. I kept my gaze level and let the heater hum of the rooftop echo in my chest even though we were no longer there. Memory can be a metronome when rooms try to push you off time. The chant grew into a rhythm that erased detail. Hands lifted glasses. Phones climbed higher to catch the approved angle. I saw my reflection in a window and recognized the posture of a person who has decided to let paper, not volume, carry the weight. The first flash cracked across the table and broke every shadow. The second flash followed before the room found its depth again. My jaw stayed loose. My fingers remained quiet on the linen. The water in my glass shimmered once and settled as if obeying a private instruction. I met my mother at the park because she trusts trees to straighten talk, without raising voices. Morning took the chill out of the metal on the swings and laid narrow rectangles of light across the rubber mat. She sat with her gloves tucked into one another and asked if I was eating. I said mornings were tidy and nights were long. She pressed one gloved hand to the bench, our old signal to keep my spine. Across the path, a kite stitched with stars tugged without lifting. The wind had opinions but not decisions. My phone stayed on silent in my pocket, face toward my leg, because silence is a tool when rooms try to claim you. I told her I was writing times, not arguments, and letting numbers carry what words would bruise. She looked at a small maple and did not argue with the method. She said patience keeps doors from breaking. I said patience is a plan when paired with steps. We watched a stroller pass like a small boat. Mira arrived late, sunglasses nested in her hair as if daylight needed cues. She waved to children she did not know, then asked if I was ready to act like adults. I said I would keep my schedule. She said schedules were cages. I said fences keep gardens from turning into shortcuts for strangers. She laughed for the general area of the park instead of a person and said the trip had been restorative. She said friends support renewal. She said rumors were unkind and that I should choose grace. My mother adjusted the scarf at her neck and watched a white dog lie down in the exact center of a sunny patch. A boy I know from the next building, Noah, braked his scooter in a path curve and asked why a girl's trip had a man in it. His voice was curious, not sharp. I told him bridges are built for a certain weight, and extra weight can crack them. He asked if tape could help. My mother said some bridges need an engineer and time. He thought about it and rode off, as if the sand might negotiate better than people. We walked the long way home because straight lines sometimes ask for more than a person has. The route passed Mrs. Klein pruning what is not there anymore. Her dogwood keeps its hands empty in winter. She looked up and down the block like a neighbor inventorying weather and decisions. Outside our building, a sedan idled nose out, facing the street instead of the garage. The engine held a horizontal note, steady and ready. I stored that angle in the part of my head where lines stack. Inside, the hallway smelled like warm carpet and a citrus cleaner that pretends to be sunshine. Our apartment carried a thin thread of printer toner even though no page waited in the tray. I opened a window the length of 2 fingers and let the air rinse. I flipped the mail and put the newest postmark on top. An unsealed envelope slid free and revealed a corner of a printed screenshot. I did not pull it farther. I placed it under a flyer for vacuum filters and left it as a placeholder that would not invite commentary. On the wall planner, the red circle kept its shape. I traced the arc with one finger and felt the paper's tooth return the touch. In the dining room drawer, the thin binder labeled Utilities sat heavier than its title. I opened to check presents, not content, then closed and turned the key. The lock answered in the soft tone I trust. Mira stood by the balcony door and said I was making everything heavy. I said I was carrying quietly so nothing else would break. She said heaviness is a choice. I said dresser hinges are not choices, yet they fail when overloaded. At noon, I walked to the supermarket for lemons and eggs. The automatic doors hesitated at my approach as if negotiating what counts as entry, then parted with a tired breath. The fruit section smelled like promises that can be kept with attention. 2 cashiers spoke about a carousel labeled Moments That Matter, and one said it looked like healing. The other asked healing for whom. I compared prices and placed a small bag in the basket with the calm of a person who expects labels to stick. At checkout, the conveyor carried my stack past congratulations cards in gold foil. The clerk asked how my day was. I gave weather. People accept weather. It leaves them free. Outside, the idling sedan eased out to make room for a rideshare, then slid back into its angle facing the street. A driver drummed fingers on a steering wheel tuned to an internal station. I stood a moment longer than necessary and then carried the bag home, palm flattened against the egg carton the way you hold something that works better with gentle pressure. In the kitchen, I washed the lemons and rolled them under my palm to wake the skin. I wiped the counter in one direction and set 2 mugs on opposite towels, soft posts that tie off the day. The printer spooled for no reason and gave me a single blank page, which I folded and slid into household. Dull names are good armor. Mira asked if I would attend her cousin's dinner. I said my evening had steps. She said steps were a theater. I said theaters have exits. She asked if we could at least post a warm photo. I said warmth needs a roof. She studied herself in the hallway mirror and practiced a softer face. The door settled deeper into its frame when a draft moved through the building's ribs. I turned the lock and heard the tongue find home, a small sound that means what it says. In the afternoon, I stopped by the pharmacy for tape and a refill. The blue floor stripe had faded to a patient gray, but people still obeyed it. A woman ahead of me told someone on her phone that a cousin had recalibrated her marriage and was thriving. She stretched the word as if it had elastic and no snapback. The clerk called my name in a tone trained never to request story. I paid, stepped aside, and let a man with a stack of bandage boxes pass. My phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number and went dark before I could decide to ignore it. I did not return it. Not all calls deserve to become minutes. Back home, the hallway smelled like someone's dinner. I set the tape on the table, checked the gallery to confirm last night's date-stamped flyer photo sat behind lemons, and watched the cloud notice rise and fall in my memory even though I was offline. File uploaded successfully is a sentence that behaves. Mira asked from the bedroom if I planned to be bitter forever. I said I planned to be exact for as long as necessary. She said exactness is cruelty dressed as reason. I said exactness keeps bridges from falling while people argue about the river. Evening flattened the light into manageable rectangles. I placed my keys on the rail of the balcony and looked down. Mrs. Klein stood near the curb, her cardigan a diluted green, her grocery bag balanced like a scale. She looked at our balcony, then at the idling sedan, then at the corner where a rideshare nose pointed away from us. She did not wave. Neighbors sometimes vote with posture. I stepped back inside and closed the door. The seal took a breath and settled. The smell of toner followed me to the table and thinned to memory. I set my phone beside the keys, screen down. It lit without sound, announced private on the lock screen, and flashed a preview from a contact renamed with one emoji. The line began to form and then erased itself. The device buzzed once, then twice, a small insistence against the wood. I pressed the side button. That cold silence returned to its job. Outside, footsteps entered our hallway and stopped just short of our door. The kind of pause that rearranges air and makes drywall report its temperature. I held my breath long enough to hear the pause decide. The co-working space sold quiet by the hour and the illusion of fresh starts by the carafe. I paid for both and chose a desk near a rubber plant that looked like it knew the rules. The receptionist handed me a lanyard and a Wi-Fi slip with a smile that did not ask for my story. I opened my laptop to a desktop I keep deliberately dull. Home, auto, bank in a clean row. Beside them, 2 plain boxes named Archive A and Archive B. Plain lives longer. I dragged last night's images into a dated folder and watched the progress bar cross without drama. A small cloud icon pulsed and rested. File uploaded successfully. The sentence did not celebrate. It confirmed. I breathed once for its honesty and moved on. The spreadsheet waited with thin borders and small font. The headers never change. Date, time, initials, location. I added a line from the rooftop clip's timestamp and another from a rideshare idling nose-out on our block. I kept the initials harmless, letters that cannot grow into a person. Save. The cloud nodded again and left. A recurring banner ghosted into the corner. Meeting, personal. And I dismissed it with my thumb like setting a stone on a ledge and trusting it to hold. In a minimized window, yesterday's searches waited where I left them. Storage options, delivery tracking, notary near me. I scrolled one result lower to mark my place. I took a screenshot with the date visible and slid the image into my phone gallery behind a picture of lemons. File uploaded successfully. The phrase worked like a handrail on a slick stair. Across the room, someone applauded a small launch with more volume than the news required. I preferred the printer's steadier breath. I sent a short test from the lounge tablet. The tray exhaled a single blank page as if warming its joints. I folded the page along the long edge and slipped it into a manila folder labeled Household in my bag. Dull titles keep eyes away. A glass phone booth stood empty by the window. I stepped in and closed the door on the room's shared weather. The air smelled faintly of hand gel and carpet glue, which are honest smells. In my measured register, I asked about hours, identification, and how acknowledgments get recorded. I did not use names. The voice on the other end answered in policy, even and unfriendly to drama. I thanked the voice, ended the call, and watched my lock screen collect a missed call without caller ID, the kind that belongs to no one on paper. I let it sit. Back at the desk, I taped a single USB under a cardboard folder whose tab read Taxes. The tape made a dry kiss, and the plastic disappeared into ordinary. If anyone rifled carelessly, they would see pantry shelves. Boring, sufficient, safe. I minimized every window until only Archive A and Archive B remained like two cabinets with good hinges. I dragged a small folder named 2024 Q4 into Archive A, then mirrored it to a clean USB I keep separate. Today's date sat in fine ink on its edge. The plastic warmed in my palm like a coin and cooled when I put it away. A phone alarm hummed in my pocket. Paper drop set last week when I thought I might be ready sooner. I dismissed it without changing the time. Rushing is a leak in a boat not finished. The elevator in the hallway gave a single bell. Two low voices drifted past the glass. I let the sound pass under my door and not through me. The spreadsheet accepted two more lines, one for a parking angle, one for a caption that tried to edit maps into mere mood. Save, file uploaded successfully. Those 4 words returned my pulse to a pace that rubber plants would approve of. When I zipped my bag, the chair legs made a polite rub against the floor. Punctuation at the end of a paragraph I worked to keep neutral. The parking garage kept its own weather, cool and concrete, layered with bass from a car that wanted to be braver than it was. I stood by my trunk in the shadow between pillars and made a hallway call with my shoulder quartered toward cement. I asked about timing in general terms, about confirmation steps, about what happens next when a person chooses rules. I wrote a single word on a sticky note and slid it behind a gas receipt, where ink and glue hide romance from a distance. The trunk closed with a measured thud that reminded me what closure is supposed to sound like. I pressed the fob until the lights blinked twice, tiny signals returning from a system that obeys. On the drive home, I collected small victories by counting green lights. 3, 6, 11. The foyer smelled like warm carpet and a florist's leftovers from someone else's celebration. In the stairwell, a child's chalk star held its shape where shoes had chosen not to step. Inside the apartment, the air carried that faint toner line again, precise and impersonal. I set the bag on the dining table and wiped the surface with a fresh cloth in one direction until the wood understood it had been seen. I unlocked the drawer and checked the thin binder labeled Utilities. Presence confirmed. I added nothing and turned the key until the lock delivered its soft consent. Mira came down the hall with indoor sunglasses and a sentence that aimed at forgiveness without stopping at accountability. She asked where I had been. I said I rented a desk to finish tasks that prefer silence. She asked if I was still being dramatic. I said I was being exact. She said exactness is a cage. I said fences keep gardens from becoming shortcuts. She offered a warm photo for the feed. I said warmth needs a roof. Her laugh tried to decide between light and edge. It settled on echo. On the balcony, the city sorted itself into lanes. I placed my keys on the rail and looked at her ring. The unfamiliar key flashed once and went still, a small polished argument. She said I should decide whether I wanted a marriage or a museum. I said I wanted rules to outlast captions. She said captions win. I said captions do not sign anything. The breeze pushed the curtain 1 inch, then set it back. The printer spooled once and fed a blank page into the tray as if it wanted to stay limber. I folded it and slid it into Household. In the living room, I opened the laptop and checked the row. Home, Auto, Bank, Archive A, Archive B. I added a final note to the spreadsheet. Today's date, an initial, a location that needs no adjective. Save. File uploaded successfully. The sentence placed a small stone in the wall I am building, not to trap, but to hold shape. She watched me from the mirror and practiced a softness designed for rooms with cameras. I kept my voice in the register that speaks to contracts and doors. She asked how long I planned to be cold. I said I was finished being confused. She said confusion is part of growth. I said timelines are part of truth. She asked what I would do next. I said I would handle this properly. The words arrived level, like a string a carpenter stretches to find straight. They did not tilt toward threat. They declared a lane. She asked if that was a warning. I said it was a plan inside rules we both live under. My phone chimed once with the sound I reserve for appointments. The lock screen displayed a polite line, downtown 7:10 p.m. I dismissed it with my thumb. A narrow breeze threaded the apartment and moved the balcony door in its track by exactly the distance the latch requires. It met the frame and completed its journey with a soft click that sounded like a decision taking its seat. The courthouse plaza kept a bright, even weather that did not ask for anyone's side. Stone benches anchored the open square, and a shallow fountain broke voices into soft threads. I arrived early and stood where a security officer asked me to stand, a taped line that turned waiting into a rule. The air held the faint cleanliness of paper warmed by machines. People crossed between buildings with heads forward and folders close to their chests. I kept my hands visible and matched my breath to the steady fall of water. The officer asked if I needed anything. I said I was fine and would remain out of the flow. Mira entered from the street with Sarah half a step behind and Ruth 3 steps farther, wearing a careful expression built for onlookers. Sarah lifted her phone by reflex and framed the courthouse columns as if borrowed legitimacy could be edited into a caption. Mira said we should talk privately. I said I would follow the process. My voice held the same level tone I use for doors and contracts. The plaza did not echo it back. It simply kept it. The process server approached with a calm stride that belonged to the space. The questions were ordinary and exact. Identity, identity. The packet came up from a bag, edges square, nothing theatrical. The words were plain, and they were the first words that mattered in this story. Divorce petition, temporary financial and possession orders. Notice of the next appearance. The server spoke them the way a level finds center, without apology and without heat. Sarah's phone lowered as the formal language refused drama. Ruth said this was unnecessary and cruel. I said I was following rules and would respect instructions. A guard stepped closer, not to interfere, only to ask that we keep the entrance clear. The fountain kept time for all of us. Mira said this would embarrass everyone and ruin any chance at soft endings. I said waiting had already been done. Caleb hovered near the curb with the posture of someone auditioning an exit. He offered half a nod to no one and turned toward the street. Maris stood at the edge of the square, still and certain. Evan kept his distance the way we agreed he would. The server recorded the time, confirmed completion, and asked if anyone had questions about acknowledgments. No one did. The plaza's brightness held the moment steady until it became fact. The packet rested in Mira's hands with a weight that finally matched the year. The wind shifted once and laid her hair against the paperwork like a ribbon on a box that could no longer be returned. I thanked the server. I nodded to the officer for courtesy. A group of jurors walked past in a low cluster, carrying their own instructions, uninterested in ours. The steps to the entrance rose in deliberate inches. I checked nothing on my phone. There was nothing left to check. The plan had reached the part where plans stop and records begin. I turned toward the exit gate. Sarah said my name as if it could reverse anything. I did not turn. The gate light blinked green, small and clear. The security wand clicked once on a belt behind me. A bird crossed the square in a straight line no one else could use. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.